Welcome to the Builders Podcast, episode 161, Jeannette Sibly, the hiring triangle, assessments, interviews, and due diligence. Before we jump into this episode, please subscribe to this podcast, hit that notification bell if you're on YouTube, and after a listen, please give us a thumbs up, like, and share, if we've earned it. With your help, we can reach more people and deliver these valuable from the trenches lessons to those that need it. Enjoy the episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another The Builders. Today we are joined by Jeannette Sibly. Welcome to the show, Jeannette.
Oh, thank you for getting the pronunciation correct. I love it. They don't mess up the first name, they will definitely mess up the last name. So thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So Jeannette she's a leadership results coach and talent advisor. She has over 40 years of experience guiding small businesses, family businesses, and a lot more. Is there anything you'd add to that?
Well, a lot of the companies I work with are anywhere from, say, $500,000 up to $30 million, with the median being around 18 to 25 million.
That's good to know kind of your audience, right? Who you're going after.
It is. I love smaller businesses because, you get in there, they know what needs to be done, and it gets done. You get into some of these really big companies, you might think you need to know what needs to be done, and then they talk about it for a couple of years. So
have lots of meetings.
I like to get results.
Yeah. Good.
It's like, get it done now.
That's right. Well, so the first time we have somebody on the show, we like to start with your story, your personal story, your origin story, how you got started, what inspired you and found you in the business world, entrepreneurship, doing your own thing, how you became this amazing person you are today, doing the things you're doing in the world and helping people. So with that, I will throw it to you, and you can start by just, tell us a little bit about yourself. Who are we talking to?
I started my career in human resources, get very active in several different large associations, and really found my leadership. And I had started leadership type activities when I was 16 and was on the board of directors for a not-for-profit or organization. And so it was really inspiring to be able to do that. And then I went from one community and moved into the Detroit metro area. And there I worked in the automotive, tier one, other manufacturing type companies. And it was really fascinating because back then, being one of the first women in management wasn't always applauded. So regardless of how you want to look at it, that's just what happened. Things have changed a lot. But one of the things I always struggled with was back in the 90s, early 90s, coaching was only for your higher C-level people, and it was something they never talked about. And so when I left my last employer, I said, I'm going to have to find people who need help, and I can help them get there. And so it started off focusing more on HR, but quickly morphed into coaching. So I consider myself a pioneer coach. I remember some of these more formal organizations getting started about the same time. And from there, I worked on coaching different small companies and helping them with their people challenges. And that's all I focus on today, are people challenges. A lot of times, if we can just talk it out, be open to a different point of view, we can actually get along with each other and create some pretty amazing results. I know I've been doing this now for 31 years on my own, and along the way guided the creation of 3 millionaires. And one of the millionaires was really a fabulous company to work with. They all were fabulous, but this one in particular, because he understood the value of coaching. And so as a result, he hired me to help them with the hiring, but also with coaching his people. And as a result, he became what's considered Austin's fastest growing 25 years ago. So it was really phenomenal to see people coming in at one level within an organization. And when they left, they went into these larger organizations at a much higher executive level than they probably would have been able to achieve on their own. Because a lot of times we don't get that business experience or that exposure or have the opportunity to really dig into why do we want to do that? What's a better alternative? Really put that creativity into play, but also put that business hat on and not be afraid to get out there and let's go for these results. And if we fail, oh, well, what did we learn? Right.
Right. So
but that's my story. I just love it. I just love helping people become leaders. I know you can't tell.
I can tell. Yeah, no, so I mean, that's what I'm getting from this, though. I mean, I think that's, obviously, starting so young, you're in manufacturing, you're doing, you're working for these companies, and somewhere along the line, you started helping other people and with the hiring or whatever. And then you find your way, you discover you like coaching. And what specifically about coaching do you like because you're talking about results. You like to see somebody, you train them or you coach them and you see them kind of blossom into something greater than they were. Is that kind of part of the best part about that?
It really is. I love guiding people to get into, sometimes when we're allowed to overthink things, we go off on different tangents and we forget the core of who we are and what we're up to. And when we get present to that and we build our skills in communication, decision making, how to work with others, how to work with and through others to get results, it can be very inspiring, both internally and for those people around us. So that's what I really, really love, is to see people go from here and then end up here. It's like, wow, okay, now what's next?
See their transformation. Yeah.
I love it. Did you meet a coach along the way? How did you get into coaching? Like, was there somebody that inspired you to make that leap or go in that direction that you recall? Well, kind of negatively it happened. I remember my last job, and I knew that it was not working out.
No.
I didn't know what to do, so I called these two highly respected coaches. One was a man, one was a woman, and each of them said, I don't know how to help you. So that's what sparked being a coach, is to provide people with that help. Because I've seen people who look like they don't fit within a company, but with the coaching, pretty soon they're amazing producers. Their performance is high level. People enjoy working with them, all because they have a coach to help them fine-tune what needs to happen along the way. And a lot of times we don't have that. And back when I was coming up through, the different ranks back then, I didn't have that access either. Or I had bosses that I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help, that kind of thing. So a lot of it was trial and error. Okay.
That makes sense. Yeah, there's probably a lot of people, even today, there's a lot of companies and people in those companies that are, they have so much more potential, but no one knows how to help them. Or no one is there to help them.
They do. It's just sad. Sad. And they've got bosses that don't know what to do. It's not that they don't want to. They either don't have the interest or they don't have the skills on how to develop their people. And that makes a big difference. A lot of people today are not coachable. That's been a statistic I saw recently where that's a big challenge for a lot of bosses. Well, some of these people may not be coachable, or you may not know how to coach them because you're trying to do like a cookie cutter approach as opposed to who is this person? What do they need? Which could be very different than this person over here.
Right. Yeah. Somebody that runs a team or has a team, and also wears all the other hats. Part of that is probably, I don't have the time. I don't have the time to, let's put somebody in place. They do their job. And, they are what they are. I mean, I try to, in my business, in my agency, I try to have like a culture of learning. We're always trying to get better, and I look at each one as an individual and what their needs are and stuff. And I think maybe that's what's missing in a lot of companies, especially the larger companies, probably, right?
Well, that, and sometimes people don't know what they need. I mean, that's been an issue as well. Using assessments that help people get into the core of who they really are is very different than using the very popular assessments out there today, which you can make it look any way you want it to look. Well, in doing that, you hurt yourself, you hurt the boss, because they're coaching you from here when really what you need is over here. Could be wherever. Okay. So I find that to be probably the biggest challenge. People don't know who they are, and they don't want to be seen as who they are because they're not sure that would be acceptable. And yet what I find is when people really own that, hey, you know what, I am not a high assertive person, or hey, you know what, I don't move as fast. I'm not a hyper bunny, one of those little energizer bunnies. It's okay. Every job has its own set of skills that are required, and personality as well.
I would imagine some of that's risk, though, that you don't want to shake the boat. Like, I don't want to learn about myself because I might have to find a different position, or I definitely don't want anyone knowing that.
That can happen too, particularly if you don't have the right coach. I remember one time there was a woman who I had met at, I had done a keynote for a large group, and she called me afterwards, and we were just talking and catching up, and she had said something about meeting with her boss that day. And when she met with the boss, she took him on. And she was a little proud of herself for having taken him on in front of her team. I said, oh, my little antenna was just waving. I said, you know what? Yeah, you really need to go get that cleaned up. You really do. Now, this is her boss's boss, okay? And so she goes, oh, Jeannette, I think you're overreacting. I said, well, that may be, but I've been at this a while. You might want to just take it into consideration. Well, she did do what I asked her to do and try to schedule a time with him to get complete or clean it up or have the conversation, whatever was needed, so they were back on, good terms with one another. He would not talk with her. I said, okay, that's another red flag. I would suggest you start looking for another position.
Yeah.
Oh, I think you're overreacting. I said, just humor me on this. Go interview for the job. If they offer to you don't have to accept it, but just see what else is out there within your company. So she did that. And so she found a job that was actually better for what she really wanted. I mean, it just fit what she was up to. So she took the job, and then she had to go back to her former boss. Now, this boss reported to the boss that she had dissed, right? And the first thing he said to her is, I don't know how you did it or what you had to do, but it's a good thing you did, because otherwise this meeting would be where I handed you a pink slip. So you're right. I mean, so often such little things like that can upset the apple cart. Yes, did the boss's boss overreact? Absolutely. Yeah. But it's not going to help you keep your job.
Right. You got to be tactful.
Yeah.
For sure. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about, so this all starts, so we want to start with hiring, right? The leadership has to hire the right people and then be able to train those people. Tell me a little bit about kind of your thoughts around hiring and how to get the best people for a company and a team and so on and so forth.
Well, there's a lot of different places I could start, but I think the most important thing for a lot of bosses to remember is you have 3 opportunities to impact who you're working with. One is hiring, one is training, and one is letting them go. So those are your 3 areas that you can directly impact somebody. Yeah. And of the 3, hiring is the least expensive. However, the problem is people do a very poor job of it. we have lapsed into this thing called intuitive hiring. Not that it hasn't been around for a long time, but it just has become more of the norm today. And what that means is statistically, within 4.3 minutes of meeting somebody, we've made a yes or no decision on whether that person is the one. Now, in 4.3 minutes, you're not going to really be able to deep dive into what their skills actually are, get through them trying to tell you, sure, I can do that, but really don't want to do that, a lot of conversations. Then, because a lot of these hiring managers don't always interview that often, they ask pseudo questions. And pseudo, I mean, what's your favorite color? What's your favorite sport? None of those actually have any bearing on their job and can actually be construed as illegal in some areas, depending on where and what and how it happened.
Sure.
But it's very important that they ask, all these managers, hiring managers, ask job-related questions. So tell me about your experience in sales. Do you enjoy prospecting? How do you go about prospecting? What was your number one success? What was your biggest mistake that you learned from? And anyone that says that they've never made a mistake is probably like a red flag, meaning you might want to move on. But again, if you structure the questions and you really listen to their answers and then deep dive into making sure that what you're hearing is and what they're saying is the truth, because a lot of people can, spin it any way you want, it makes a big difference. It really does.
I for some reason, it surprises me that you'd have hiring managers or people that are in charge of hiring, like just use their intuition within a few minutes, decide if they like somebody and that, like that's the most important thing for them. Somebody like I'm in tech and, I mean, certainly I hire other people other than web developers and designers and stuff, but yes, I need to be able to get along with that person. They may somebody that I can see in the fit in the culture, but maybe it's also, it's more critical in my scenario that I'd have to also know, what their experience was, what they've done. And I love that. I think it was, I don't know if, there's somebody out there, maybe it's Elon Musk or somebody that has like a hiring process where he asks them, tell me a problem you've solved or something you've done.
Yep.
And step me through that process and you learn a lot because they'll be able to, somebody that actually did something will get really excited about it, or they'll get really in depth about it. And I think that's what's been important to me. It's like, and people can have anything on a resume. So really let's get into the nitty gritty. So that sounds like what you're saying is like, get into what this person experience actually is, what they've actually done, and ask those questions.
Yeah, and in my book, Hire Amazing Employees, this is the 3rd edition, an Amazon bestseller. Hopefully that you were pointing.
We'll center it. We'll make sure.
Whatever. But in that book, I talk about a lot of hiring bosses use the interview as their decision maker 90% of the time. That's the only determination, the only factor that they use. So if they're, the resumes they might spend 6 seconds on. So, and a lot of these resumes, over 80% of them have inaccuracies or flat out lies. I mean, you'd be surprised how many non-existent companies and educational degrees are out there. And so then they bring them in for an interview. They like the person. In fact, I just posted an article today that's talking about likability. We focus so much on whether we like them or not and not enough on job fit. So in my book, what I propose is use a third of the interview, a third assessments and qualified assessments, that is, not your normal, people can make it look any way you want kind of assessment. And then third is due diligence. A lot of times we're not doing a thorough due diligence, and then your employees don't feel comfortable either because they intuitively know that I'm not sure I trust this person. That kind of thing. But if you do all three, what it does is it helps filter that, helps show up on job fit. Does this person fit the job? And there was a Harvard Business Review study done years ago where they had, I think, 360,000, maybe the number's a little bit different than that, but it was a lot of people over a course of 14 years. And they were looking for the number one indicator of job success, of job. And so it could have been, is it, gender? Is it race? Is it whatever it is? College, particular course of study. And what they found was the number one indicator is job fit. So when a person fits their job, they're going to do even more than you can even imagine. So for example, one of my favorite is in sales, because people could be very good at selling themselves, particularly those who are job hoppers. They got a lot of good experience of saying what people want to hear, spinning it anyway. I mean, they're really good at that. But they can't sell the product or service that you want them to sell. That's just not their bailiwick. So that's a great example, and I've had a lot of sales managers complain about that. It's like, well, he looked the part, he sounded the part, he gave the right examples, but he can't sell anything. So really getting clear is the job fit. Do they have the assertiveness? Do they have the ability to get out there and either knock on doors or pick up the phone, whatever is required? Are they sociable enough? Do they go around at network meetings or trade shows and meet people? Or do they stand in the corner or at the bar and wait for people to come to them? So again, when you're interviewing people, you can't go and check all those boxes out. But if you're using a qualified job fit assessment product, that will help. If you're doing a thorough interview focused on actual experience, that will help. And then if you're doing due diligence. Remember one time there was a gentleman who could really spin the story. Both assessments that were used were saying red flag, red flag. And when they actually did their due diligence, called the references, two of them said, no. So, a lot of people say, well, references aren't going to tell you anything. I said, well, it depends on how you ask. And in my book, Hire Amazing Employees, there's a full chapter and the questions to ask to get into the heart of, then you're asking the references that they gave you the names for. Tell me about this person. It may take 5-10 minutes, but you know what? It'll take 5-10 months, even years, to get rid of them if you get the wrong one. So There's been a lot of companies I've talked to where they knew after 6 months that the person wasn't the right person, but they kept them on for another year. And, the employees are upset. The person intuitively a lot of times does know that it's not the right job. Everybody's doing a workaround. That's very expensive. And customers don't appreciate having to, work with incompetence, and they'll just go to another company.
Yeah. That's tough. And like you said, expensive is a good word for that. Because you're making this, once you make the decision to hire somebody, it's not always easy to remove that person or, and it can have those ripple effects, which can also be losing clients or customers.
And I think too often we forget about that. I mean, a lot of times we're hiring people for customer service. We think, oh, it's an entry-level job. It's of no impact on our business. What harm can they do? Well, hello. Yeah. If you get the wrong customer service person, they can do a lot of damage to your company, even if they stick to the script. So it can be their tonality. I worked with some really bad customer service people on trying to resolve issues, and they don't know how to use the system. They weren't taught on how to use the system. They weren't taught on how to correct incorrect information. They weren't taught to say, your delivery is late. Well, give it another hour or two. In other words, when you call back again, hopefully you get somebody else, because I don't know what to do with you. So, but that can be very exasperating. But in a lot of times, that's how you lose customers.
And hopefully the leader or the manager, or whoever's managing that person, becomes aware of that and does something about it. But again, it's maybe not easy, or it's easy to ignore, and you hope that they get better. That could be another
Yeah,
thing.
often they don't.
Um, yeah,
I remember
yeah, I
one time
think.
calling into this company, and she was the receptionist, and you could hear her on the back typing. And she had to ask me 3 times to repeat myself on what I wanted. I said, "Are you typing?" She goes, "Yeah, I'm multitasking." I said,
Hmm.
"Well, number one, multitasking is a myth." "Oh, but I heard this on a podcast somewhere." I said, "Trust me, it's a myth." And you've asked me the same question 3 times. It's not a hard one to, say, "Okay, let me transfer you to this person." But
Right,
you're
right.
not paying attention.
Not good. Yeah. So
Yes.
due diligence is references. Is there anything else in due diligence? Is it like in my case? I think one of the things, again, from my experience. I mean, obviously, I'm hiring people that have to build things. They have to be able to code. They have to be able to translate a design
Yep.
or have a design, all that stuff. So what I typically do is I'll have like a trial period and I'll test them on something and kind of ease them into it. And that's kind of how I overcome that is because I have to, even though they can tell me their resume can tell me a lot of stuff, and we can talk about resumes all day, especially. Oh, they're full stack. They do everything. They've done everything. Um, but even if they're telling you they're really good at one specific thing, let's test them in our environment. And
Yep.
that was a game changer for me is being able to actually have test projects ready to go that will test them on all the elements that I need them to be able to do. Is that included in that kind of due diligence piece?
Well, I would put that more in the assessment and the skill
Assessment.
testing. So what you're
Okay.
talking
Okay.
about is skill testing, which is very valid. And due diligence, again, depending on your industry, like I work with financial companies, a lot of them have to be licensed. So
Hmm.
you need to check on the licensing.
Oh, checking on
If
things.
you're a
Yeah.
U.S.
Okay.
employer, you need to check on their social security, make sure that they are who they say they are, things of
Okay.
that
Okay.
nature. If a degree is required for whatever reason, do they actually have one from that university, or did they just attend and not really graduate? Again, this isn't
That was actually, that was
a
actually something that
judgment,
really,
but it's just a fact of what happens.
when you said that though, I've looked at so many resumes in my life, and I look at somebody's colleges or whatever they have there. Rarely do I'm like, okay, I guess I don't have any way to check. Sounds good.
Well, if you do use a good third party, and there's some out there, a good third party who does all that for you, then
Okay.
you've got third party input. It's going to be done consistently. One of the biggest issues I think some employers run into is they only do local or state background checks. Well, with all the people moving from state to state, area to area, country to country, it's really, really important to do a US based search. Well, it's going to take a little bit more time, but if you've got someone who's highly experienced and that's all they do, then they know the shortcuts, and are still able to, deliver the value, the information that is
Yeah.
required.
Yeah. So from an international perspective, then, like I have an international team, it's a little harder for me to do background checks and stuff. So
Yeah, it
I
really
guess you got
is.
to, I guess you got to kind of do everything you can do. And
It's really all you can do. I mean, people like people, so they say, sure, they're a great person, but would they hire them? Not
yeah,
necessarily. And here's a question that I asked. It's in my book. It's called All Things Being Equal. Would you work for this person? And I'm not attached to whether it's yes or no. And they'll say yes or no, and I'll say, why? And that's where you get the juice. So if it's like
mm,
no, because they don't have the integrity, they don't follow through and do what they say they're going to do, even though he's a good person, then you've got that additional information. Is that enough to bump him or her out? Well, it depends on the company. A lot of companies would say yes, well, but not all of them. And if they
yeah,
say, sure, I would work for them. Why? Because he does what he says he's going to do. He really takes care, or she takes care of her people. That is such valuable insight that a lot of times you're not going to get, that just means so much to people who are bosses and leaders today, to be described that way.
So let's say you hire somebody and you thought they were a good fit. You've done all your due diligence, your job fitting, make sure, but they still don't. For some reason, there's something not comfortable about that position for them. Like they're either falling short in some area that you didn't anticipate or whatever. I mean, the options are, right. I mean, you talk about, I think you mentioned, letting go. That's one option. But I've had certain cases where I just refit them into a different position, like, or tune the position for that person. And because I may, in every other aspect, like I may really like this person. I really have a good feeling about them, but they are a good fit maybe in the culture. They do have good skill set, but sometimes you have to tune the job around them. Is that kind of a thing too? Like sometimes it's us that have to change, or something in the process or system has to change to fit that particular person too, right? You have examples of that, or you have thoughts on it?
I love the question. It's a very good question that more employers should be asking themselves. Number one, what was the assessment you used to select the person? So there are a lot of 4-quadrant social index type assessments out there that do not comply with the Department of Labor guidelines for pre-employment and selection use. There's only about a handful that do. So if you're using an incorrect assessment for pre-employment purposes, that would be the first place I would start. But let's say you did use the correct assessments, because not all assessments are created equal, and they do need to be used as designed and why their whole purpose. I would look to see, like, what is the issue. There was sometimes I'm hired to do like a final interview, particularly when they're on the fence, they're not feeling comfortable, but yeah, boy, that person, they really like the person, like what you just said, right? And so what they do is they have me do the final interview. I won't interview anyone without this assessment. It's called the PXT Select. It's through Wiley. I've been using it for over 31 years, and it's got an incredible degree of accuracy. It also has a distortion factor, and it looks at your thinking style, your core behavior, and your occupational interest. And why is occupational interest important? Because if I'm hiring you for a job, say to be a financial officer of my company, but your interest in finance is at the bottom, guess what? I probably am not going to get my P&Ls on time. They may be hard to read and understand. And that's a true story of a company that actually went through that.
Wow.
So that's number one. Number two is, what am I expecting that person to do? So I have a client, long-term client, calls me up. I hired this person. He's been really good at what he does, and now he's not, which happens a lot. And what happens is, here's your job description, but people being people start taking little extra things on. And sometimes they do well, and sometimes they don't do so well with those extra things. It's not part of their strength. Let's put it that way. And that's what had happened with this person, with this young man. And I said, well, the benchmark here looks fine from what you've described, but it doesn't sound like that's what you're expecting him to do, which then puts him in areas that are not his strengths. Oh, so what do I do? I said, you have two choices. You can either let him go, which is expensive, or you can sit down and have a conversation with him and say, we need to bring you back to the core of what you do, and what can we do to help you do that? Because sometimes people get bored. So then they stretch, their boundaries, or whatever you want to call it, their job descriptions. And so what can we do then as a company to help you get more out of, your job? So then that's another one. And then the third one is, a lot of times we like to hire people who could think really fast on their feet. It's a thinking style. Boop, 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 boop. The problem is they think really fast on their feet, and so the downside of that is they're bored a lot. So there was a company one time who hired a CFO who, and they had the information. They had one that was like on a scale of 1 to 10, a 10, and another one that was a 5. So they hired the one who's a 10. Of course, he leaves in a couple weeks later because he's bored, and then hires the one who's a 5, because it's not that the 5 isn't smart. It's sort of like doing a jigsaw puzzle. You know, I have a neighbor. Her and I trade jigsaw puzzles. Well, I have a tendency to get them done faster than she does. But that doesn't mean she's less smart. It just means it's going to take her longer to get the puzzle done than it takes me to get the puzzle done. That's all it means. And that's the difference between a 5 on thinking style and a 10. So again, depends on the company, depends on the expectations, but a lot of times we mistaken how fast somebody thinks as whether they're going to be the right fit or not. And a lot of times that is not the right indicator. Yes, it's important to know that, but let's get realistic. A lot of times putting people more in the middle for a lot of jobs is really more important.
So sometimes it's the employer's expectations of, or what they think the right fit is for this job, but the reality is it's not, and you have to learn that lesson the hard way.
Well, they often do have to learn the hard way. The problem is they keep learning it over and over and over, and they're not learning it. So again, if they get using the right assessments, they're doing their due diligence, and then the third piece of that triangle is the interview, and they're asking the right questions, which is where we started this conversation. Those three together make a big difference in the quality of the person that you're hiring. Just because you hired a good person doesn't mean they're going to fit the job. It's, will they fit the job? Is that person going to fit within the culture? Is that person going to create less brouhaha than somebody else who doesn't fit the job? Because if you don't fit your job, you don't realize, oh, I don't fit my job. It's just I'm bored with the job. I don't like having to dot every I and cross every T, whatever that is. Yeah. So, but knowing that ahead of time, you can, like I had a client one time who hired somebody who was really high in sociability, like on a scale of 1 to 10, a 10. That means he can talk with anybody. There is no stranger in life, right? He sees a person, hi, how are you? That's great in sales. Yeah. The problem or the weakness in that is his listening skills left a bit to be desired. So after a couple weeks, guess what kind of complaints were coming back? He's not listening. Well, they knew that before they hired him. So it's just a matter of sitting down and saying, remember we talked about this, what can we do to help you? There isn't all the brouhaha around, oh my goodness, we thought he was the one, that he'd be perfect. Well, no, the honeymoon period's over. Let's get down to real work now and help you making that person successful.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's as an employer myself, having a team, and it's like, I do my best with the, up front, try to hire the right person, but at the same time, I don't want to, if there's, hopefully I'm learning along the way, like I have, I know what type of person not to get and what things, but hopefully everyone learns that. Unfortunately, it's expensive to learn that sometimes, right? Tell me a little bit about, assessments a little bit more, because this is something that I don't think I know I'm not familiar with. I don't think I use formal assessments. I have a process. I have my own assessments, what I think I need, or probably based on something I Googled. So I don't think I'm as good in this area. So, there's companies, you said there's one you were using for like 30 years that have actual assessments that have been tested, and you follow this and your odds of success rise, hopefully.
It does. It makes a big difference. I have a newer client who just is so excited that they're now using a tool that actually helps them see who that person really is. And because it makes a big difference in how they manage them, how they plan for their future. But backing up, not all assessments are created equal. There's over 3,000 publishers out there of assessments, and they all say, sure, you can use this for hiring. And so here, for your audience, here's the thing to do. Ask for the technical manual. Most of them will not be able to provide you one. And in that technical manual, you want to look at validity. You want to look at the reliability coefficients. Are they at 0.7 or higher? Most of them, if you were to actually see a technical manual, would be around 50, 40 to 50. Maybe. Again, you'd have to look and see. And then the thing is distortion. Most do not distinguish on whether somebody's being forthright or not. And so there's no distortion. That's why you can make a lot of tools look any way you want them to look. And I remember coaching an executive one time where the company asked them to take a particular tool. And I said, well, you understand that that tool should not be used for pre-employment. He said, oh, don't worry, Jeannette, I can make that thing look any way I want. Well, a lot of people can, and they know they can. So that really takes away from the validity and reliability and the reason why the tool is being used in the first place is to look to see how are they going to fit in the job, what is the coaching and management concerns I need, what's their strengths. And then with the PX2 Select, we also have what's called a leadership report, which is phenomenal because it gives what the strengths are, where the areas are for improvement, like that. And so that kind of information, which is scientifically and legally based, makes a big, huge difference in the quality of who you're hiring. Because a lot of times people will base it on that, and sometimes they're like, oh, we just have them take it to take it. It's like, but anything that you do pre-employment is fair game with the attorneys. So it suggests you not use that attitude. like get real, you know.
Right.
What assessment are you using? Why are you using that? Like that.
So the assessment, is that something that the person you're hiring actually fills out or does, or is that something you fill out or work? Like who's filling this out? And is it like just a form, or is it what?
Yeah, the tool has been around for 32 years. And
okay.
So every other year it has been revalidated and updated. And it has the largest validation study in the world, this particular product of 3.3 million. So what you do is you set up what's called a benchmark. Like what do we want our successful candidate to look like?
Okay.
And then they take the assessment, which is standard for everybody. And then the results will show up however they show up. Then you have an interview report that, particularly if you're like outside of the benchmark, is that going to be a strength, or is that not going to be an issue at all? Sometimes it's not, many times it is, particularly in sales. And you always want to look at the distortion, and most people are pretty forthright. At least I've been finding that. But if they're not, then you cannot rely on the assessment. And I've had that happen once, where a client didn't look closely enough at the distortion before he asked me to do the interview. And I said to him, do you still want me to? Yeah, sure. Well, instead of a 1-hour interview, it took us 2 hours. And by the time I was done, I was exhausted. And I said, well, how did you feel about the assessment? Yep, it's exactly how I want to be seen. How I want to be seen. So that spoke volumes. It's not who the person really was. And the fact that it took 2 hours to go through something that normally would only take an hour had nothing to do with thinking style. It just had to do with spinning it in such a way.
Like, what's the best way I can put this? Yeah, right.
A lot of questions to ask, and, like that kind of thing. But those things happen often. When I work with my clients, we don't step over stuff like that. Let's get honest. Let's really look and see what the real issue is. And again, it's not like a make or break. It's like, now that you have the clarity of what the real issue or issues are going to be, what do you want to do? It does not take away their decision-making power.
So basically, an assessment is something that where you can kind of tune it to what's important to you. And then you take that via the interview and you go through that assessment with the interviewee, and then hopefully not take 2 hours. and yeah, I think you mentioned a couple times where Yeah, I mean, there's professional interviewers out there that will tell you whatever they want,
Yep.
they think you
They're
want to hear.
good. They're
Yeah,
really good at what they do.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So you got to be aware of
Haven't
that.
helped the
Hopefully,
company that hires them, you know.
yeah. That's the more information you have about somebody you're hiring. You know, like even social media and stuff. There, I mean, I've used tools to gather resumes and stuff, and they'll often, however, they crawl and get all the social media info, and so you can kind of link out just to see a little bit, just to get a sense for the person. What crazy stuff are they posting on the web? So if you are getting hired, you know, it is important to make sure you're not being too crazy on the web. But yeah, that's what I think is fascinating, because hiring is, I mean, it's super important. And a lot of times that, from the perspective of, it is a cost, and it's a cost, it's beyond just what you're paying them. It's a cost to the, you know, wasting your time, wasting, you know, having bad experiences with the, your customers or clients. And it's, I mean, it's, yeah. So it's super, super important. So so tell me this, what kind of, for yourself, for what you do, you know, what's, you said you like to work with people between 1 and 30 million, right? Those type of companies, smaller companies. Do you work with any particular type of companies, or is it kind of all over the map in terms of, I mean, the industry, or the, you know, what's your ideal client? What do you work with the most?
Well, usually it's the owner operator. So meaning that the owner of the company is actually working day to day in the business.
Okay.
So that often, whether I work directly with him or her or somebody at an executive level or not, you know, is up for discussion. Usually in the tech, engineering, finance tech, fintech they call it, manufacturing arenas. And a lot of times the company is really, really focused, really committed to improving their hiring process. I call it a strategic hiring process. You can create hiring processes in your sleep and all that stuff. A lot of times they don't really have the credibility, the validity or reliability to them, meaning that if you do it with one, you need to be doing the same thing with all the other applicants for a particular position. So companies need to be just aware that hiring does have legal ramifications, as well as, you know, retention, revenues. It has a lot of impact on your results. If you have the right people, the company, it just excels. It's just phenomenal how that works. But if you don't, it can be really hard to keep people. Really hard. And usually the cost, if you're looking at costs, I think the latest thing I saw was between 35 to 50% of what the annualized salary of that person would have been per month. And then, of course, times it by the number of months they actually work. Sometimes, however, you get these companies that have like a 2-year training program. That can actually take your cost up to 100% when they don't work out. And that happens often. It happens often. People hang in there until they find their next job, and then they leave. And it's not like they didn't want to try it. It wasn't like they weren't being honest that, hey, I want to try this job. It's just they got in there and saw what the reality was, and they said, no, I don't want to spend my day coding all day long, or I don't want to spend it whatever, you know, whatever that window is. Or in some sales, like high-end, high-level sales, it could take a couple years before that person is ready. That's a lot of money out the door.
Yeah, that's right. That is true. That's why what you do is so important. Helping leaders or managers, whoever, find their way and build a hiring program, whatever you want to call it, that is going to attract the right people. And yeah, good stuff. So what, if somebody wanted to find you on the World Wide Web, if they wanted to reach out to you, talk to you, they wanted to get to know you, you have some books. What can, if they want to learn more about hiring, or, you know, just chat with you, how can they get in touch?
Well, Well, probably the best way is on LinkedIn. I have my own page. My name, if you can get the spelling right, should come right up. Not
We
too many
pronounced
people
it right.
with the same name.
Seibly.
As for this book or any of my other books, I also have brag books, which are good because a lot of times companies don't do a very good job of bragging about what they've accomplished, or individuals bragging about what they've achieved. So I have a couple books on that too. You can go to my website, which is seibco.com. So that's S as in Sam, E-I, B as in boy, C as in cat, O.com. And then go to the book tab and it'll say business books, and that's all 3 books are there. The reason I send them to the website is then you can buy on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or use an indie book company. You have a choice. Right. If you don't care, you just want to go to one or the other, then just go directly to that site and the book should come up.
That's why I love websites. Even though we got social media, we got all these other places you can go, like having a central hub with all your stuff there where people can find everything they need about you is smart. All right. Well, thanks. Yeah. Thanks for joining us, Jeannette. Thanks for sharing your experience, your knowledge around hiring. Hopefully, I know I learned some things today or inspired me to get better. I learned a bit about assessments. It's good. All right. Until next time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's all for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed that. Again, please subscribe if you haven't already and give us a thumbs up if we deserve it. If you want to comment on this episode's page, provide me with requests on topics for future episodes, or inquire about being a guest, please find your way to thebuilders.fm. You can contact me there or add a comment under these show notes. Now a word from our sponsor, my agency, Unified Web Design. We build custom websites, features, we maintain websites, we work with agencies to fulfill their web design and development needs, and more. If you are interested in our services or are looking for an agency to work with as a partner to build awesome sites for your clients, feel free to reach out to me at unifiedwebdesign.com. There's a handy contact me link at the top. Fill out that form and it will open a ticket, and that ticket will find its way to me. Thanks for joining me today. We'll see you next time.